August 25, 1944, Cherbourg Harbor, Normandy, France. Sergeant William Henderson wiped his hands on his grease-stained uniform as he observed an immense line of trucks stretching into the distance. Critics in the British Army had dismissed these vehicles as underpowered and unsuitable for modern combat. Yet here they were, 6,000 trucks, poised to undertake a monumental task, supplying General Patton's Third Army as it advanced across hundreds of miles of war-torn French countryside. The initials GMC on the hoods identified the manufacturer, General Motors Corporation. For the largely African-American drivers climbing into the cabs, however, those letters symbolized much more than a brand. They represented survival, the difference between success and failure, and the vital supply line keeping Allied forces moving towards Germany. Unbeknownst to anyone that morning, a truck once considered inadequate would become indispensable. The 2.5-ton GMC CCKW, also called the Jimmy or deuce-and-a-half, would emerge as the backbone of one of the most ambitious logistical operations in military history. Its story, however, began quietly in General Motors' design offices in 1939. The U.S. Army Ordnance Corps had outlined specifications for a new medium-duty tactical truck. Requirements included a payload of 2.5 tons, 6-wheel drive, and the ability to traverse rough terrain under all weather conditions. General Motors' Truck and Coach Division, operating out of Pontiac, Michigan, responded by adapting existing commercial truck designs. While adequate for civilian purposes, these specifications raised concerns for military use. France placed an initial order for 1,000 units in late 1939. Production began at the Yellow Truck and Coach Manufacturing Company, featuring closed steel cabs, fixed cargo beds, troop seating, and a conventional appearance that would not have seemed out of place on a civilian construction site. Essentially, these were commercial trucks outfitted for combat. The rapid German advance through the Ardennes in May 1940 altered the truck's destiny. French forces, despite advanced tanks and fortifications, collapsed under the speed and coordination of the Wehrmacht. The British Expeditionary Force withdrew to Dunkirk, and France fell within 6 weeks. Of the 2,000 ACKW-X trucks already delivered to France, most were captured and repurposed by the Germans, who found them surprisingly reliable on the Eastern Front. Meanwhile, the remaining trucks were rerouted to Britain under emergency contracts. British military testing in 1940 produced harsh assessments. Evaluators criticized the long wheelbase, poor maneuverability, insufficient engine power, slow acceleration, marginal hill climbing ability, and limited performance on mud and soft ground. British officials concluded the design was unsuitable for mechanized warfare and redirected roughly 1,000 trucks to the Soviet Union under Lend-Lease agreements in 1941. In total, 2,466 ACKW-X trucks were built across all recipients. Although initially rejected, the lessons learned from the ACKW-X program shaped the next generation. Unlike the British, American designers understood that success did not demand perfection in every individual vehicle. Instead, mass production of adequate trucks could outmatch any enemy through sheer industrial volume. By 1941, the improved model, designated CCKW, entered production, laying the groundwork for the logistics operations that would prove decisive across Europe. GMC's internal designation system explains the truck's name. The first C refers to the 1941 design, the second C indicates a conventional cab, K stands for all-wheel drive, and W denotes dual tandem rear axles. Compared to the earlier ACKWX model, the upgrades were meaningful, though not groundbreaking. GMC installed a new 270 cubic inch inline six-cylinder engine, replacing the 248. This engine generated 104 horsepower at 2,750 RPM, a 27 horsepower increase that significantly improved hauling and climbing capabilities. With 216 foot-pounds of torque available at just 1,400 RPM, the truck gained the low-speed power necessary for heavy cargo and steep inclines. Two wheelbase versions were produced: the CCKW 352 with a 145-inch wheelbase for artillery transport, and the CCKW 353 with a 164-inch wheelbase for general cargo operations. This versatility enabled the same chassis to meet multiple combat support roles. The truck's frame employed a simple ladder design with riveted crossmembers, allowing ease of manufacture and field repair. Of thousands of trucks, freed enough steel to construct numerous destroyers or tanks. The cargo bed underwent several design iterations due to material limitations. Initial all-steel beds were heavy, wooden beds warped and cracked under military use. A hybrid steel frame with wooden slats offered only marginal improvement. Ultimately, a simplified all-steel bed emerged, minimizing material waste while maintaining durability. The final truck emphasized practicality over technological sophistication. It was reliable, easy to produce in large quantities, and repairable in the field with basic tools and limited training. Primary production was based at General Motors' Yellow Truck and Coach plant in Pontiac, Michigan, with Chevrolet's St. Louis, Missouri facility later joining. At peak efficiency, the two plants produced a CCKW every 7 minutes, continuously, day and night. Components, from stamped body panels to precision engine parts, were assembled into complete vehicles on these relentless assembly lines, powered by tens of thousands of workers, including many women who had entered the workforce to replace men in military service. Between 1941 and 1945, roughly 562,750 CCKW trucks were produced, encompassing all variants. Standard all-wheel drive, non-cabover models numbered about 518,000 to 519,000. In comparison, Germany manufactured only around 100,000 trucks of all types during the same period, the Soviet Union fewer than 200,000, and Britain's total production was even smaller. The CCKW alone nearly matched the combined output of all Axis truck production. The true test of the CCKW came during the Normandy invasion. On June 6, 1944, over 150,000 Allied troops landed across 5 beaches. Tactical success secured a foothold on Hitler's Atlantic Wall, but the Allied forces soon faced logistical challenges. By mid-July, more than 1 million soldiers were packed into a 50-mile wide by 20-mile deep sector. Each field, bordered by centuries-old hedgerows, became a defensive strongpoint, slowing progress to mere yards. Operation Cobra, launched on July 25, 1944, allowed the Americans to break through German lines with concentrated bombing and rapid armored advances. Patton's Third Army then raced across open French countryside, sometimes covering up to 80 miles per day. The advance created an urgent demand for fuel. Sherman tanks alone consumed roughly 150 gallons per 100 miles, with entire armored divisions requiring hundreds of thousands of gallons daily. British, Canadian, and additional American forces compounded this need, pushing Allied fuel consumption to over 3 million gallons per day. Supply lines struggled to keep pace. While the Allies had planned depots and logistics networks, the rapid advance exceeded expectations. Bombed French railroads, intended to hinder German reinforcements, now impeded the Allies' resupply. Artificial ports like Mulberry harbors temporarily alleviated the bottleneck, but the CCKW's reliability, versatility, and sheer numbers proved indispensable in bridging the gap between supplies and the front line, ensuring the momentum of the invasion continued. Patton's armored units were running dangerously low on fuel just 300 miles from their supply depots, and the First Army was rationing ammunition. Combat readiness was precarious. Without an immediate, large-scale resupply, the Allied push risked stalling, giving German forces time to reinforce defensive lines and potentially losing the chance to end the war in 1944. On August 21, 1944, American logistics planners convened an emergency strategy session. Over 36 continuous hours, they devised a bold solution, a dedicated, high-priority truck convoy system modeled on the efficiency of express freight railroads. Every operational truck in the European theater would be mobilized, with 2 one-way routes established from Normandy to forward supply points. Civilian traffic was prohibited, and military police were assigned to every junction to keep convoys moving without interruption. This plan demanded more trucks than any single command controlled. Within hours, vehicles were drawn from non-essential units. Artillery battalions surrendered their prime movers. Engineer units turned over construction trucks, medical companies released ambulances, and infantry divisions contributed their organic transport. The GMC CCKW became the backbone of this unprecedented operation. By August 1944, tens of thousands of CCKWs had already arrived in Europe, distributed across depots and motor pools. Now, approximately 6,000 trucks were assembled for the first convoys, eventually peaking at nearly 6,000 vehicles simultaneously on the road. The operation faced another challenge: manpower. The U.S. When the call for drivers went out, many answered, despite the grueling conditions, not for personal glory, but out of duty to their comrades and belief in the broader cause of civil rights at home. Around 17,000 African American soldiers became drivers for what would be known as the Red Ball Express, joined by roughly 3,000 white soldiers. Though convoys remained largely segregated, both groups shared the same perilous mission. Most drivers were under 24, often with little prior experience behind the wheel of large trucks, some never having operated a motor vehicle before military service. Training lasted only a few days before they were entrusted with 2.5-ton trucks carrying up to 5 tons of critical supplies across active combat zones. The drivers hailed from every region of the United States. Rural farmers accustomed to tractors, industrial workers with assembly line skills but no driving experience, college students interrupted by the draft, and sons of sharecroppers seeking better opportunities. Operations began on August 25, 1944. The Red Bull designation derived from railroad priority markings used in the late 19th century, and red circles marked both trucks and designated routes in France. The system was straightforward. One route carried fully loaded trucks to the front lines, while a parallel route brought empty vehicles back, often transporting prisoners of war. The length of the routes eventually extended nearly 400 miles as the front advanced. Convoys were officially organized in groups of 5 trucks, escorted by jeeps with 60-yard spacing and a 25-mile-per-hour speed limit. In practice, speed limits were largely ignored, with drivers modifying engines to exceed 56 miles per hour. 2-man teams alternated driving, though sleep was scarce. Trucks delivered everything essential: gasoline in jerry cans, ammunition, rations, medical supplies, spare parts, mail, and occasionally personal or unofficial cargo. Loading at Normandy ports ran around the clock, with port crews, many of them African-American, efficiently handling cargo in minutes. The journey itself tested endurance. Drivers operated in near-total blackout at night, navigated damaged roads and bridges, and contended with detours that were often unmarked. Air attacks, though rarer by late summer 1944, remained a threat, as did landmines. Some trucks were equipped with mounted .5 caliber machine guns, mainly for reassurance. Despite these dangers, the Red Ball Express kept the supply lines moving, enabling the Allied advance and playing a crucial role in sustaining operations during one of the most demanding logistical efforts in military history. German forces planted explosive devices along road edges and likely parking spots. Some were intricate trigger mechanisms, while others were simple buried shells or captured munitions rigged to explode under vehicle weight. Red Ball drivers quickly learned to stay on paved surfaces, park only in cleared zones, and remain vigilant for disturbed soil or suspicious items. Fatigue was the most persistent threat. Drivers regularly pushed beyond normal human endurance, fueled by coffee and sheer determination. A few relied on benzodrine tablets, amphetamines supplied by medical officers, to stave off exhaustion, though the practice was officially discouraged. Darkness and rough roads contributed to the hazards, with some accidents proving fatal. To mitigate risks, relief drivers often rode in passenger seats, ready to take control when the primary driver could no longer continue safely. Still, exhaustion exacted a heavy toll. The vehicles themselves endured extreme strain. The CCKW trucks, while robust, were pushed far beyond design limits. Engines overheated under heavy loads in summer heat. Transmissions failed, clutches burned out, and brakes wore down in mere days instead of months. Tires, overloaded and driven fast on rough terrain, frequently failed. Maintenance was challenging, performed roadside, in fields, or under improvised tops. Mechanics worked with limited tools and scavenged parts, often performing temporary fixes to keep trucks moving rather than complete rebuilds. Scheduled oil changes and maintenance routines were often skipped. Improvisation became essential. Mechanics repurposed gaskets from available materials, bypassed broken components with creative solutions, and cannibalized parts from other trucks. The CCKW's straightforward design made such field repairs feasible. A mechanic with basic knowledge could diagnose and fix problems using whatever resources were at hand. This adaptability became one of the truck's most crucial strengths. By late August, abandoned trucks littered the Red Bull routes, with some estimates suggesting over 80 vehicles were left behind when repairs were not possible. 12,442 tons of supplies to forward depots, surpassing all pre-war logistical estimates. Daily delivery stabilized between 10,000 and 12,500 tons, with roughly 900 trucks operating simultaneously. Over 82 days, drivers transported 412,193 tons across France. covering 121 million ton-miles and sustaining multiple army groups during one of history's fastest military advances. Private James Rookard of the 514th Quartermaster recalled delivering all items General Patton required. From gasoline and ammunition to food and medical supplies, often under enemy fire and amidst V-1 buzz bomb threats. Drivers faced constant danger, yet they pressed on, sometimes making repeated trips along the same routes, losing vehicles to accidents, mechanical failure, or sporadic enemy attacks. But never failing to deliver critical cargo. Corporal Washington Rector of the 3916 Quartermaster Truck Company described racial tensions among Red Ball units. Segregation meant black and white drivers often operated separately, and discrimination could affect everything from convoy passing to mechanical assistance. Despite official segregation, on the road, when trucks broke down or shells fell, survival often overrode prejudice. Cooperation between black and white drivers occurred whenever necessity demanded it. The CCKW trucks themselves earned legendary status. The French rail network remained mostly inoperable despite Allied repairs, and many ports, including Antwerp, were unavailable. Accidents, ambushes, and theft challenged the operation. Valuable cargo sometimes vanished from resting trucks, appearing later on black markets in liberated cities. Still, the Red Ball Express prevailed. Its combination of durable vehicles, resourceful mechanics, determined drivers, and relentless operational pressure ensured the continuous supply of essential materials, enabling one of the most rapid advances in military history. Drivers and cargo personnel frequently faced allegations of theft, often baseless, which fueled racial tensions within the ranks. Military police investigated many such incidents, but recovered supplies were rare. Still, the convoys continued without pause, as halting them was not an option. General George Patton's Third Army, at the forefront of the Allied push across France, consumed material at an unprecedented rate. Tank crews engaged almost constantly, exhausting ammunition in combat far faster than supply officers anticipated. Each tank battle could deplete an entire load, demanding immediate resupply. Patton's relentless offensives produced decisive victories and captured large areas, but only because the Red Ball Express ensured his units remained fueled, armed, and provisioned. Patton himself acknowledged that while bold maneuvers brought success, they were meaningless without logistics. Tanks without fuel were immobile, artillery without shells was silent, and infantry without rations or ammunition was ineffective. Supreme Allied Commander Dwight Eisenhower also recognized the critical role of the operation. That supply capacity ultimately dictated operational possibilities. Brilliant tactics alone could not overcome logistical failure. The Red Ball Express exemplified this principle in its simplest form: trucks, drivers, and roads, unremarkable but indispensable. The contrast with German supply systems was stark. Despite its mechanized image, the Wehrmacht relied heavily on horses for transport, employing over 2.8 million equines during the war. German truck production was limited by steel shortages, fuel scarcity, and industrial focus on weapons manufacturing. When mechanized units advanced, supply lines often lagged, contributing to defeats in both Russia and North Africa. In France in 1944, German logistics faced additional complications. Allied air dominance hindered daytime movement, resistance fighters sabotaged railways, and convoys were ambushed. The horse-dependent system, adequate for static defense, could not sustain mobile operations. German soldiers often suffered shortages of ammunition, food, and fuel, and many admitted that American logistical efficiency was as demoralizing as its combat power. By mid-November 1944, the strategic context allowed the Red Ball Express to cease operations. Antwerp's port was cleared and reopened. Rail lines repaired by Allied engineers resumed limited service, and portable pipelines began delivering fuel directly to forward depots. On November 16th, the operation formally ended after 82 days. Exhausted drivers returned to their units, some continuing in supply roles, others moving to combat positions as African American volunteers were recruited to meet infantry demands. The GMC CCKW truck, initially underestimated by some Allied observers, proved invaluable. Its simple, rugged design allowed field repairs with basic tools, and even heavily overloaded or damaged vehicles remained operational. Engines with cracks, failing transmissions, and worn brakes often still reached their destinations, unloaded, repaired, and returned. Patton considered the 2.5-ton truck one of the most essential weapons in modern warfare, understanding that without reliable supply, even the most advanced military units are crippled. Colonel John Eisenhower, son of the Supreme Commander and a logistics officer himself, later emphasized that the Red Bull Express drivers were crucial to sustaining momentum. The American advance across France depended on these trucks. Any delay could have given German forces time to fortify and possibly extended the war into 1946. When Germany launched its Ardennes offensive, the Battle of the Bulge, in December 1944, supply trucks and their crews returned under new convoys, including the Little Red Ball and White Ball Express. The same trucks and drivers navigated snow-covered roads and blackout conditions, delivering reinforcements and supplies to counter the German thrust. What had been a summer operation now faced winter hazards, but the essential task remained unchanged, keeping Allied forces moving and combat-ready. During the Battle of the Bulge, German air raids intensified as the Luftwaffe deployed its reserves to support the offensive. Still, the supply trucks kept moving. Ammunition reached the encircled American units, fuel sustained the mobility of tanks and vehicles, and reinforcements arrived to secure the flanks. Limits irrelevant, and snowdrifts frequently blocked passages, demanding hours of labor to clear. Drivers in lightly heated, open-cab trucks faced constant danger of frostbite, yet the convoys persisted. The logistical framework established by the Red Ball Express proved resilient, capable of functioning under extreme conditions. After Germany capitulated in May 1945, the GMC CCKW trucks continued to serve. Vehicles that had traversed France now moved across Germany, transporting displaced civilians to refugee centers, distributing food to starving populations, and carrying occupation forces throughout the defeated Reich. Some trucks were later sent to the Pacific, supporting campaigns in the Philippines and Okinawa. Production of the CCKW ran through 1945, and by war's end, General Motors had manufactured more of these trucks than Germany produced of all vehicle types combined. With roughly 562,750 units built, the CCKW fleet exceeded the pre-war truck inventory of most countries. Allied forces, including British, French, Soviet, and Canadian armies, relied on these vehicles through Lend-Lease agreements. The truck's straightforward design contributed to its long service life. CCKWs remained in active U.S. military service into the 1960s. Although replaced in frontline service by the M35 series in the 1950s, Older CCKWs continued to operate in National Guard and Reserve units for years. The 1952 film Red Bull Express, while acknowledging African American involvement, was altered under Department of Defense guidance to portray racial integration that did not exist in 1944. After the war, many veterans returned to a segregated America. Those who risked their lives supplying the fight against fascism often faced discrimination in housing, employment, and access to civil rights. Some were able to use GI Bill benefits for education and home loans, but these opportunities were frequently limited for black veterans. Banks denied loans, universities enforced quotas, and employers favored white applicants over qualified African American veterans. Despite these obstacles, the legacy of the Red Bull Express endured. During the 1980s and 1990s, historians began documenting the operation in more depth, collecting veterans' testimonies and preserving them in museums. The National World War II Museum in New Orleans houses extensive Red Bull Express materials, including restored GMC CCKW trucks and personal accounts from drivers. James Rucard, who served in the 514th Quartermaster Regiment, recalled, "We were young and afraid, but we did the work. Many doubted us, but every successful delivery proved our competence and earned respect." Rucard's reflection illustrates the dual consciousness experienced by African American soldiers, serving a nation that denied them full citizenship while contributing decisively to its victory. The Red Bull Express stands as an example of African Americans demonstrating skill, courage, and reliability despite systemic discrimination. Continue to inform military logistics studies worldwide. The design of the GMC CCKW had a lasting impact on post-World War II military truck development worldwide. Its 6x6 wheel arrangement set the standard for medium tactical trucks, and its philosophy, favoring mass-produced, easily serviced vehicles over highly specialized military models, became widely adopted. Nations around the globe either copied or adapted elements of the CCKW in their own truck programs. Soviet engineers, who received thousands of CCKWs through Lend-Lease, carefully analyzed these trucks. Subsequent Soviet military vehicles, including the ZIL series, reflected clear influences from the CCKW in both layout and operational capabilities. The Soviets recognized that the truck's real strength lay not in any single technical detail, but in its combination of adequate performance, simple maintenance, and sheer availability. Modern military trucks are far more complex, equipped with computers, automatic transmissions, central tire inflation, and armored protection. Yet the core challenge remains unchanged, delivering supplies reliably under combat conditions while keeping vehicles simple enough for field maintenance. Since 1945, designers have sought to replicate the CCKW's balance of capability and simplicity. The truck demonstrated that military excellence is not solely about superior specifications. The British correctly judged that the ACKWX was underpowered and difficult to handle, but they misjudged what mattered most. British drivers soon came to value the same traits once criticized by their evaluators. The long wheelbase, though awkward on narrow roads, provided excellent stability for heavy cargo, and the engine, while modest on paper, delivered reliable performance. Its straightforward design allowed mechanics trained on more complex vehicles to maintain it with minimal tools and parts. After-action reports highlighted that the CCKW outperformed more sophisticated British trucks in sustained operations, showing resilience under neglect and harsh conditions. The story of the CCKW and the Red Ball Express illustrates what truly determines success in warfare. Winning does not necessarily depend on the most advanced technology or impressive specifications. Rather, it requires dependable equipment produced in overwhelming quantities, operated by individuals committed to their mission. The CCKW was not the fastest or most powerful truck of the war, but thousands of adequate trucks driven by determined soldiers sustained one of history's most effective military campaigns. The 2.5-ton truck, initially dismissed by British experts, became a critical lifeline for Allied forces from Normandy to the Elbe River. Many of the drivers, 75% African American soldiers, operated under conditions of racial discrimination, yet they maintained supply lines through exhaustion, danger, and injustice. Their efforts proved that skill and determination are not determined by race, and laid groundwork for challenging segregation in the post-war era. On August 25, 1944, Sergeant William Henderson completed the final checks on a CCKW before it joined the convoy. Express, proving that sometimes the most crucial contributions come from the simplest machines in the hands of people determined to get the job done.